Welcome to DMs Discuss. Welcome to DMs Discuss, where today DMs discuss. I'm Mike Brown, and I'm here with my co-hosts Chris and Scott.
Hey, I'm Chris.
And I'm Scott.
So I am, like the other two, a dungeon master, a photographer, a product manager, and kind of a lover of all things nerdy.
And I'm Chris. I'm a bartender, a DM, occasional bar manager, and also a big fan of the old video games.
And I'm Scott. I work as a programmer. I'm a gamer, nerd, lover of D&D and D&D podcasts.
What better to do when you love D&D podcasts than make your own? We all kind of know each other through a local Toronto group and have identified that there is kind of a lack of resources for dungeon masters in terms of like rulings, discussions, and what we talk about after games are done. So we wanted to make this as a resource for all of you.
And what you might find on this podcast is things like rules discussions, a particular spell, like, will this spell break your game? How do you deal with that? Things like, how to engage your players, how to get people at the table, how to deal with conflict at the table, where to find players, everything from kind of A to Z, A to Z when it comes to D&D DMing.
Yeah, both the big picture and the small picture stuff you have to worry about.
So, yeah, I mean, Mike mentioned that we know each other from kind of a local bar, and I guess I'll go into that a little bit because it's kind of a cool story. So there's a bar here in Toronto that was named Meltdown. No longer exists, unfortunately, but it was this really cool place where you can basically go there and have a beer, and they had a bunch of consoles like PCs and PS4s and Xboxes, and you could basically like have a beer, sit there and play games with your friends, and it felt like this very like couch co-op-y kind of deal, except now that you're older, you could drink alcohol while you play. So it's kind of how I met Chris. Chris, do you maybe want to talk about the bar?
Yeah, I was working there for quite some time as a bartender. I took over the place when it was rebranded as a much cooler side quest. And that's around the time we started really bringing D&D into the forefront of kind of like the bar experience, especially, in some of the slower, quieter times. We're partnered with the local group called Toronto D&D, and they had a mix of beginner nights to teach people how to play, as well as a persistent recurring world as kind of a drop-in campaign, similar to Adventures League, a little bit more relaxed in the rules and stuff like that, more casual, and a strictly local kind of affair. Also, where I also ran into Mike for a campaign I was running there. The two of them dropped into that one, and been playing that one to this day.
Yeah, still going. Still want to get back in and play Greg when
One day
we'll
be able to actually
when the world allows
do that in person, because man, does that dungeon have a lot of handouts.
Yeah, no, and I mean maybe we could like talk a little bit about that because I think it's kind of cool. But Chris runs this as a DM. He runs this campaign, and it's called what was the name of it, Chris?
the Black Shrike Vanguard. Oh, Pungeons and Flagons.
Yeah, Pungeons and Flagons, the cleansing of the colons.
And the thing that's cool about Chris's campaign and what drew me to it is like I always kind of enjoyed the thought of D&D. I didn't like get into it early in my life, but I always enjoyed the thought of like playing and getting to play with people. And one thing I was always worried about is like committing to every Sunday or every day at a certain time. And Chris's campaign was really cool in that it was kind of, you're all working for this Vanguard and you could kind of drop in. So if you weren't there at a session, no big deal. The Vanguard just brought in another character, right?
Yeah, like all millennials, we all have commitment issues, and D&D is no different. But yeah, Chris's campaign made it really, really easy to get in. And yeah, like Scott said, one of the problems is commitment issues, but also not knowing if you're going to jive with a party, not knowing if you're not going in with a group of friends that you already know, whether or not like personalities will clash and stuff like that. Chris's game made it really cool because there was no pressure to come back if you didn't like the game, if you didn't like the people you're playing with. You could just hop in, try a session, and then come back whenever sessions were posted if you could get in.
Yeah, that was really the appeal for me when I started, was because, I had played a few campaigns before and I wanted to start one, but I had a couple of like, false starts essentially, other than with like a very old group of friends who I would only get together with every couple months. And so it's like, well, like what's a system I can build a game around that allows people to have in a regular schedule and stuff? Because also at the time, running a bar and stuff, my schedule was all over the place. So this allowed me that if I had free time, I'd just run a game and see who could show up for it.
Yeah, yeah, really, really great system that ended up leading to a few years of pretty great friendship and many, many table talks, which kind of led us to this.
Yeah, and I mean, like Chris, how did I know you've been DMing for a while? Like, how long have you been DMing, and kind of what got you into D&D?
I've been dating for about 6 years. It was right after I moved to Toronto. I became friends with my like elementary school best friend's roommates, who was in university at the time. And one of his friends, she started a campaign. It was like, hey, join us in this. And yeah, that's where I started. That's where I first introduced the now iconic character in my homebrew campaigns, Crucial Colon, who is my first playable character. And yeah, we did Lost Mines of Fandelver, and it was an absolute blast.
How about you, Mike? What was your first exposure to D&D, or kind of
I
what
was
got you?
exposed to D&D at a really young age. D&D was a kind of babysitting parenting tool for my uncle. My mom's one of like 12 kids, and her youngest brother is my uncle, but he's only like about 10 years older than me. So when he used to watch me on weekends, because he lived with his parents still and they lived across the street from us, he would just kind of like sit me in a corner of a table while he was playing with his friends and be like, "You're a wizard now. Only talk when talked to." Uh, and
You're a wizard, Harry.
yeah, basically, it was my "You're a wizard, Harry"
That's
moment.
almost as good as Hogwarts.
Almost, yeah. I got to sit around the table and like witness some pretty epic moments when I was like barely old enough to recognize what was going on. And then yeah, I fell in love with the game then, but didn't really play much because it wasn't cool yet in high school and whatnot. And then it started to come back into the forefront of like popular culture when I was in university, and I started playing again then and started running some games with some friends of mine, like I guess in my early 20s, so like
So
10
I,
years
I'm
ago.
just imagining, I'm just imagining a 4-year-old running around in diapers. Do 4-year-olds wear diapers still? I
No,
don't know, but
Scott, if you did, you
a
developed
3-year-old
late.
running around in diapers yelling magic missile around the house.
I mean, you're not far off. My mom's brothers were very, very kind of eclectic in their personalities. My one uncle was like super into magic and D&D and board games, and the other one used to just like put me in the back seat and cruise around blaring Zeppelin at the like max volume.
I feel like
So
I'm the culmination of your two uncles, because my nephew can attest to that. Where like, oh, you're coming over for Christmas, like we're playing board games and we're playing Magic. I've taught him how to play Magic, and um, he's kind of seen some of the D&D mini stuff I do and things like that. But yeah, I'll throw him in the back of the car and blast some Metallica. So
yeah, yeah, pretty much exactly that.
nice.
Yeah, and then yeah, I started running a game for a few friends like about 10 years ago, and I've been running pretty much. I've been running a game consistently since then. Different groups of friends, different campaigns and stuff, but I've been running a game at least one game for about that amount of time now.
Yeah. So I think with me, like the first thing that got me into D&D is there's a big park here in Toronto called Trinity, Trinity Bellwoods Park, and it's this big park where everyone goes to like hang out and have picnics and drink and things like that. But there's a community center at that park, and what they did was they have an annual yard sale where people would kind of like buy tickets and set up a table, and it was just a way for people to like. It was this big community yard sale, so you'd find magic cards there, and old clothes, and guitars, and just all of this stuff. And I think that's when I first. I don't know how old I was, probably in my early teens, but I think that was my first exposure to D&D. I actually found one of like I think it was a 4E like red box, and I had no clue what it was. But just based on the cover, and I think there's like a big dragon on the front of it, and I was like, oh, this looks really cool. So I bought it, and I looked through some of the material. Never played. But even with things like certain like trading cards, like I would just collect them because they looked cool, or I liked the art on them, and things like that. And that was my first exposure to it, was that red
Yeah,
box.
that was me with Magic.
I love when people find like old D&D source books, like the box things like that, because it feels like such like a cursed antique store thing. It's just like, read this book, and soon you'll spend $300 on dice and source books.
I mean, I don't think you're far off. I think that's exactly how it
Yeah.
goes for most people.
I also think that 300 number is super conservative.
Yeah, no, and I mean, after reading the book, I think it was like that kind of left my mind for a while. And then when things like Critical Role and stuff, like Critical Role obviously has been like paramount in bringing this to like pop culture, and like you see it on Stranger Things and stuff like that. But it's always something that I've wanted to get into, and I listen to podcasts like Critical Role, and there's another one. It used to be called Drunks and Dragons. They rebranded, and I'll probably pull up a name in another episodes at some place. But that was my like first exposure to it, just episode after episode, and eventually that led to like being friends with Chris at the bar, and Chris being like, "Oh, I DM," and like, "Oh, we have these sessions, like you should join," and that was kind of like my first, like my foot in the door of an actual campaign or kind of
Yeah,
group.
I don't think I joined that group until like session 2 or 3, because at that point you guys had already left an undead paladin in a field to be recovered and be a big bad later in the campaign, I believe.
No, I mean, no, we didn't leave him in a field. We literally helped free him from a temple. So a little worse.
Oh,
We
okay, so
assisted his
that's even
escape and let
worse.
him wander off.
Yeah, and I mean,
That's much worse
I
than what I
was
had been told.
I was so glad when Mike joined the campaign, because literally at our first session, this was like a drop in. So there was no coordination in terms of like characters, and it was all random people that you didn't know each other, and everybody came to the table with a cleric.
Yeah, literally when I messaged Chris to be like, "Hey man, are there still spots in this game on Sunday?" He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Cool. Character creation rules, like any ideas?" And he was like, "Just bring anything but a cleric."
Character creation rules.
Okay,
No
cool.
clerics.
Yeah, no clerics. It was Chris's only restriction on me.
I think it's funny that that's how we first met, but then the Thursday campaign is now also all clerics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they
Yeah.
keep introducing overpowered subclasses, I'm gonna keep playing them.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think clerics are like cler- clerics are the COVID-19 of D&D, where
So many variants.
so many variants, but also like you start off with one cleric, and then they spread the word to your fighter, and now your fighter's taking a dip into Tempest.
I think the
And
very thing's very accurate, because you're just like, oh, like I can plan around like everyone going like war cleric because they want that like early level cheese of having the extra attack, and then next thing you know they have one that's like extra healing. And like, okay, I'll figure that out. Then it's just temporary hit points.
I love that first session. I like, and even though it was like 5 clerics or something like that, and I guess that's part of the reason I love D&D is like, we'll talk about it in later episodes, but like, building a group, right? And you think about building a group like a conventional MMO, and it doesn't have to be like, you can do silly things like 5 clerics, and it worked. It worked
I
for
mean,
a
I
long time.
think that like party composition doesn't really mean a lot, because emergent storyline is always more entertaining. Because the idea that 5 clerics were called to deal with an undead and somehow accidentally unleashed a lich,
Yeah, that somehow makes it even worse than it already was.
it just seems like something that 5 level 1 clerics would do by accident.
I mean, why would you send 5 level 1 clerics to deal with the lich, right? Like,
Well, no one knew
Well,
what it was. That's the
yeah,
whole
I
point
mean,
of it.
that's fair. Send some of
It's
the
like,
higher level guys.
which left you with the very believable, sorry, it's my first day.
because it literally was. That's perfect.
No, I mean, so like that's a little bit about how we know each other and our first kind of our steps into D&D, and like D&D is kind of what brought us all together. So maybe we can talk about what we're currently DMing. Mike, you want to go first? Like, what are you currently DMing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, but I guess people listening don't.
I don't know all of your games, but I know one of them.
Well, I mean, I'm only DMing the one game right now. Well, and another one that's like super sporadic. But every once in a while, I'm DMing a Curse of Strahd campaign that isn't really Curse of Strahd anymore. It went entirely off the rails in like the second session because Chris is playing in that game, so of course it did. But yeah, that's me. I'm currently. I did mention that there was a fucking windmill in the distance, so that's on me.
Yeah, that was your first mistake.
Yep. But yeah, so that's me. I'm just DMing that on Wednesdays, and then sporadically I'm DMing for another group of like university friends. Yeah, that's it.
What are you DMing for your university friends? Is there a module you're running, or is it homebrew?
No, that's all. That's all homebrew. It's just a fantasy world based on a novel by a local Toronto author named Guy Gary. Okay, it's like a Renaissance Italy style campaign.
How about you, Chris? What are you DMing?
Right now, technically DMing a lot of stuff. A bunch of it's kind of put on hiatus for a little while because of pandemic plans. But currently, what I'm actively DMing is a hex crawl archaeological adventure kind of thing. Classic jungle temple raid with enemy factions and stuff. Then on the back burner, I have a big cult mystery campaign for my high level players. I think they're like 18 or something right now.
Yep.
Yeah, around that. And then also I'm running a redo of my first campaign with Scott and other people. And that is the Cleansing of the Colons, which is just a very classic big bad adventure.
Yeah, so when we say that we're part of Chris's campaign, like the Black Strike Vanguard, we're actually like second generation Black Strike Vanguard. Chris is
That
kind
is
of
a fair point. Everything in mine tends to be a shared world where there's like the games happen in the same universe. So kind of people have titles and stuff they're inherited. They become NPCs in other campaigns. It's a fun thing I got going on.
yeah, for sure. Uh, in terms of me, like right now, I'm currently DMing. Drum roll, nothing. Um, and why is that? So I tend to kind of enjoy the player side of the table more. I do DM on occasion, and most of that is kind of to fill gaps. So sometimes Chris is tired and can't run a game, and we still want to play. So I'll scrape together a one shot. Or recently, Mike was relocating, so I ran kind of this little 3 session. It was supposed to be 1 to 2 sessions, ended up going three. And they're generally kind of just these one shots and a varying level. I mean, the first one I ran was kind of a level 3. Uh, the last one I ran when Mike was relocating over those 3 sessions, I think you guys were like level 13, and I let you guys have like just multiple
Yeah, I
rares.
think we started at 11 and got to 13 by the end of the 3 sessions.
Yeah, I don't know. It was something like that. But
Yeah.
I just like to kind of be creative and play around. I'm not so much into kind of setting up these long running like homebrew campaign sort of deal. More so kind of just writing one shots and DMing those.
Yeah, which is super useful for some of the stuff we were doing with Toronto D&D. To bring it back around to that, um, when stuff opens back up, I believe Chris and Scott will probably still be doing stuff when we find new bars to run at. Um, but I think all of us have had experience in teaching and bringing new players in to the fold, and then also running some DM workshops through Toronto D&D to teach people stuff like how to write one shots, how to structure one shots, how to structure campaigns and stuff like that. So we'll try to break some of that stuff down using the experience we've gained through doing it in person in Toronto D&D in future episodes.
Yeah, and I think some of that stuff is like being a DM or DMing can be very daunting. And I mean, you guys know me; I get like pretty nervous leading up to DMing, and I think a lot of people do. Like, I think it's kind of a natural thing. But a lot of my first time actually DMing was for 4 friends who had heard of D&D. They're not really kind of the nerdy type, so I wasn't really sure if they'd enjoy it or not. But it was a Lost Minds of Fandelver, the starter kit for 5e, and it came with pre-filled character sheets, blah blah blah, and you just hand them out, and you read through a little bit of the module. We had a like pretty fun session, and I've also kind of done these one-on-one things, text-based, or I had a previous girlfriend where I did a little like texting with her and gave her a little sidekick,
That's
like
a
a,
different
a
kind of role
fighter.
play, Scott.
No, no, no. No, this was strictly D&D. Um, yeah, no extra D there. Um, but yeah, I mean it's daunting, I think. And if you're finding this podcast and you haven't DM'd before, um, some of the things we're talking about may not be familiar to you, but as we release episodes and talk, like, we're gonna take you beginning to end. So I think some of the things we're talking about are like finding players, where to find players, modules and how to run games, scheduling, things like that. So ground up.
For sure. And while you might be new to DMA and looking for resources, we're new at this, and we might miss stuff or might not clarify some things in ways that would be super useful to you. So if there are any things that we miss, feel free to hit us on social or contact us through email and let us know about things that you'd want covered in future sessions.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty open. Like, if you have a question about a specific ruling, or you want to like bring up a scenario that happened in one of your games, and what we think about that and how we'd rule that, or kind of um, things like that, or just advice on a particular aspect of prepping, setting up, running, or even things like how do I paint minis, or how do I craft some terrain. Um, we can
Yeah,
definitely help with that.
yeah, absolutely. Next week, session one, we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to start with starting, how you find a player, like the mix of players and whatnot, how you pick your setting, whether or not you're going to run homebrew, pre-written, and what a true session zero really is, stuff like that. So basically, all of the basics you need to know to start your own campaign.
Yeah,
I will have a very biased view on homebrew versus pre-written.
I
And
think I
I am
also
much
have.
lazier and less creative than Chris, so I will have the opposite view.
Yeah, and I think I am very much in line with Mike. So we'll kind of talk about that. Some of the other things we'll talk about are like character creation, scheduling. What do your players need to bring to session zero? What is a session zero? Um, and kind of all of that good stuff that happens before D&D happens.
Awesome. So yeah, hope we were at least a little bit entertaining in this first session, and hope you come back for our session on all the things you need to start your own campaign. I'm Mike, and if you need to slide into a DMs, DM us on Insta, Twitter, or Facebook at DMs Discuss, or catch us on email at dmsdiscuss@gmail.com.
I'm Chris, and you don't need the alert feed to find new episodes. Subscribe using your favorite podcatcher app.
And I'm Scott. Hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, check the show notes for links and other fun stuff. We'll catch you after a long rest.